So I want to talk about boundaries. In our spiritual journey, there is talk about oneness and realizing our true nature of interconnectivity with all things. Oneness means that everything is interconnected. Oneness is all-encompassing. And the idea of realization means it's realizing what you already are, what we already are. So you don't become one with everything. You don't find God. You realize it, which means that it's always been. And you simply realize what has always been, your true interconnected nature of belonging to everything, which releases and completely dissolves and transmutes all past ideas of separateness and all the personality that was designed from a place of the belief and the feeling of separation and the attempt to try to find and grasp life, try to grasp and hold on to certain things without realizing that those things were already you, and that by the design of the unified reality and the projection of your consciousness, you are incapable of actually possessing any external thing outside of you, because it's not actually a thing. It's manifesting your own consciousness out of your own consciousness, and it is not actually substantial. It's designed actually, this whole universe, this whole soul journey is designed actually to point us back into ourself. So our reaching out to find oneness with certain objects, it's always futile. It always disappoints us. It leaves us heartbroken, depressed, all these different things, because we are eternal, and it is only in the realization that we are the eternal, we are everything, that everything is within us, that true satisfaction can be found, because our true nature is actually already completely infinitely satisfied, and thus any idea of lack or limitation of I'm lacking something, it simply falls and creates, you can never, if you have a belief system that you're lacking anything, you will always create that experience of lack. No matter what you seem to attain, you will never feel fulfilled, because it is that very perception or belief in lack that is a disconnect from presence with what already is, with who you already are, with what life already is, which is absolutely ungraspable, and because it's just every moment, it's just the space. Like, you can't grasp the space, but you can kick back and relax. And in that, you receive what already is, which is yourself. You receive your precious self, finally, when you stop seeking. There is space for, I'm just going to take a moment and do that feeling, but there is space for eternity, which is what you are, to land. To land into the body, finally, and to become nourished, fulfilled by the love of your own self, which is what you are, and all is seeking outside is just a seeking for oneself. And the more you find fulfillment with the moment as it is, and identify less with the separate being, and become more in the meditative presence of connection with the sense of simply being consciousness, the more time slows down, the more tender and sensitive you finally admit to yourself that you are, and the more healing work there is to do, and grief that comes up regarding from all the places that have been neglected within your external seekings, or external reaching, or abandoning these parts of yourself, often in the sacral, in the belly, the feeling center, the sensual center, the creative center, or the inner child, where joy exists, where pleasure exists. So as we make the journey inwards, boundaries are necessary in order to realize our oneness and our unity. Because although it seems paradoxical that there would be boundaries within the idea of interconnectivity, you have to understand the boundary is not inherently, it's not real, right? There's no real boundaries because there's only one thing. And at the same time, in order to make that journey to that realization, you need to set boundaries with yourself, right? Because everything is yourself. But you're not here to put up a wall between you and somebody or something else, literally, or to like block that thing and say, you're not part of my oneness, you're taking away from my spiritual journey, you're taking away from me being me, and projecting that. Because if you're doing that, there will still be a fragmentation within your consciousness, because that is part of consciousness that you're realizing is all that is and all that exists and is what you are. So it requires we accept all of us. So in recognizing that everything is already us, and in that presence where we are already endlessly fulfilled, and all our seeking externally seems way more futile, because there's a way deeper, more tender process of actually being present with the intelligence of the body's feelings and all the repressed parts and emotions that have been kept dissociated from and unconsciously bypassed, and trying to appear a certain way to be liked and validated by this world so we can get the things that we were taught. Because inherently in our growing up as individuals, we, for the most part, most of us, because we're not yet developed or grown up as a species, we grew up into a species or into a situation where instead of continuing to flow in our natural state of grace and of authentic expression and of oneness and unification with ourselves, we incarnated into a wounded, distorted, fragmented matrix of projected from human beings interacting with the world, believing it is separate from themselves because they grew up in the same kind of environment as I'm talking about, where they didn't feel fully held by the all-embracing womb of God, the oneness of the mother of existence and the self. So we have this idea of divinity being something outside of us, love being something outside of us, connection, belonging being something in other people, because we didn't have the unconditional support by our community to develop into our own individuals while still having that secure attachment with reality, where even if other people are not coddling us, we are imprinted with the natural resonance of recognition of oneness, because our body is built to be in a resonance of oneness, of a nervous system that is settled into, open to, and flowing with nature, where there really doesn't feel like there's a divide, where it feels like the earth is always holding you, the air is always holding you, the water, the fire, the trees, the plants, the animals, there is an intimacy that is as intimate as, and this is not just a metaphor, this is literal, also as intimate as the air you breathe, seemingly being something outside, but it's also what we are. It's also going inside. So there's no division, right? We're like hollow reeds for nature, and we vibrate with nature. And when we forget mentally, when we clench up, protect ourselves, our nervous system, our body isn't fully open and relaxed. And so there's a cosmic purpose for this, and it's part of our learning. And but part of growing up as a child is to feel that interconnection, right? Always, even in your individuation, to always have a secure sense of being one. That is the future of where humanity is going for. That is what enlightenment is, and that is the society we're embodying, and that's what nature is evolving into. Through all of us, nature is becoming aware of itself. Through all of us, and not just itself, like, oh, I'm a human, but I am nature, I am life itself. Woo! So, there's a oneness thing, and there's a boundary thing, okay? Because we are one, but we are also individuals, okay? I'm not like, I can see that I am in a body that appears to be different than your body, and that I'm a unique expression of the one consciousness of the universe, and you are, and that's part of the play. It's part of the paradox. So this is the paradox of boundary and openness, of the masculine and the feminine. Feminine like the open, more so the receptive, and masculine more like the boundary or the warrior or power, the will. So these two yin and yang polarities make up life, constitute life as it is. And so it's really important that we have boundaries in life so that we can orient ourselves to this inner wholeness and unification of these polarities within ourselves, feminine and masculine. And so we become truly individuated, because we cannot realize our oneness until we realize our aloneness or our individuation. Because it is actually our enmeshment with the collective and our enmeshment with other people and our seeking to find oneness in them through codependency, through our anxious attachment and getting lost in someone, getting lost in a group of people or in a partner or in whatever it is. So it's actually this that keeps us from realizing our inherent unity, because it's rooted in a sense of, here is where I find my belonging, and when I'm alone, that means that I'm disconnected. So in order to find our connection with ourselves, we have to have boundaries with certain ways of having done things in the past, with certain places we've been giving and leaking our energy to unconsciously. I'm very excited, but I'm going to take a moment to slow down and drop in so I can really be present. So right there, I just set a boundary with myself, which wasn't disconnecting me from anything. It was actually bringing more connection. And so a boundary is, rather than a wall, it's like a mirror. So it's a mirror, it's an opportunity to go inwards And it's not saying that what's outside is separate, or making that wrong, or fighting against it, or being violent to it, even though it can manifest in those ways when necessary. As part of the greater realization of oneness and the self, there has to be a level of recognizing that what's outside is pointing you back inside, and putting a boundary with yourself in a way of saying, I'm going to do something different than the instincts that pull us away from ourselves, the unconscious instincts that are actually rooted from a place of separation, that come from a place of seeking, which avail to nothing. So it's actually the dissolution of false boundaries within us, and it's the reorientation to what will actually fulfill me. And usually what we need to fulfill us is less than what the world expects from us or demands from us, or seduces us with, sells to us, or what we've been conditioned to seek outside from this inherent trauma of the feeling of separation. So how this will manifest in someone's life is you will continuously, it's not to say that exploring those avenues, it's not to say that the world is not here to help us to realize ourselves, because it is. We are already inherently one, and we've come to realize that in the world with the reflection of the world. So it's not about excluding the world, it's about being, the world, use the world to bring you deeper into yourself and explore all those patterns of seeking and all those different things that excite you, because it does ultimately serve, right? It does, you learn about yourself, you learn what works and what doesn't work, and you learn through experience. So there's full integration, because God doesn't want to doesn't want to leave a single stone left unturned in the experience. And that's why we're doing so much insane, weird, crazy shit, so that we can become integrated and embody the fullness of who we are as the infinite. So it helps to go into, it's necessary to go into these different habits that we've built along the way with consciousness to continue to surrender, right? We don't want to become so religious or dogmatic that we deny or bypass certain aspects of ourselves. So explore those different addictions and urges, at your own caution, but with consciousness, so that you're fully there for it, rather than using it to dissociate. And over time, you will learn, as things continue to leave your life. Like, this is the initial way that many people have spiritual breakthroughs and awakenings, is when everything in their life falls away and collapses. And that is life putting a boundary for you, saying, nope, I know you think that you want that, but it's actually only taking you outside of yourself, actually through this spaciousness, right? In the boundaries, there's spaciousness for the self, right? So all this to say, to tune into and become okay with saying no to old ways of being and old expectations and imprints cast upon you by the unconscious projections of our collective ancestry, by our conditioners. Yeah. And I'm going to pray right now for the right usage of boundaries. It's important to have boundaries from the world, from the collective mind. So I pray that we all know that we are allowed to have to be in peace and in love, and that actually the only way we can contribute to this collective that we desire the best for, because in our hearts we acknowledge it through empathy as one with us, as a part of us. I pray that we realize the necessity to have boundaries with it, so we can, because a lot of the collective mind, it's a mind dissociated from the body of humanity and the unity. And that's why it's so grabby, it's so seducing, and so stimulating, and it's so easy to fall into, because we feel that if we have boundaries with those things that we will lose connection, and we fear that we will die in a way, because our ego will die, our sense of personality and the way we relate to the world through a certain sense of I am this person. Hey world, can you see who I am and all these things? Can you accept me because I think like you, and I move like you, and I speak like you? So that those parts of us who we define ourselves to be in the context of approval from the world will die, and we'll feel like we'll die, because the world won't be able to define us. And yet we owe that to the world. We serve people, we serve aspects of ourselves in the world that we put boundaries with, in order to learn how to take care of ourselves and learn what we need to feel whole. Because then we are able to contribute our authentic self. We are able to take them off the hook from what patterns you might be feeding and enabling. That are not rooted in deep authenticity and wholeness. And it's not to make them wrong, because there's different nuances and situations, and there's no story about why the boundary needs to be set, or why the universe is drawing you away from different things. But just know that it's all for the best if someone puts a boundary with you, or if you're putting a boundary with someone else, right? It doesn't mean it's nothing personal. It's actually universal. It's actually, oh wait, this is exactly what's needed for some reason to come deeper into myself, and where there's like this gap left and longing when somebody's like, oh no, this anxious attachment of like not knowing how to deal with that sense of disconnection, when there's a desire for connection with someone or something, when you don't know what to do, when you're just there and there's nothing to hold on to. That's where the work is, in that aspect of self that feels empty and hasn't been fully met or filled by your presence and by your love, which can only actually come from release and from dripping and descending consciousness, feeling that at a pace much slower, in a way much more tender, much, much different than what we've known, tried to be, which is where we find our true self. So in order to show up as our true self and offer that love and be in true connection, we have to have boundaries on things that are causing us to be in illusion connection. And there are places where we can become rigid, and we can become like, oh, I don't need anything in the world. I'm a spiritual person with my spiritual boundaries, and this is all an illusion. And it's nothing like that as well, because we are here to know ourselves through the world, right? So there's certain things in the world which foster more of this. And then ultimately, we're here to stretch our capacity to be dynamic and embodied in love unconditionally beyond our egoic projections of separation, and beyond the stories of I'm different than you, or I'm better than you, or I'm higher than you, so fuck you, which is actually the whole illusion that we're realizing the unified solution, or essence, or answer to reality within. So it's nothing like that, and life will stretch us to see how selfless and how true to love and how present with all parts of ourselves in the world we can be. So it's about that dynamic of openness and fluidity, and feminine nature, and the receptivity and the humility. But like I said, in order to find that place within us, it is an essential component, half of that, to have the right boundaries for ourselves, and to know that we deserve, we are welcome, invited by all of life to take as best care of ourselves as we can, so that we can show up fully without this distinction of, oh, I need to show up because I'm going to get this, or catching where we're coming from separation, and having boundaries on ourselves there, and having a lot of grace and a lot of openness, not a disciplinary boundary of punishment at all, right? This is all for love. This is so important. And so, as we put boundaries on things in the world, and say enough to the nonsense and to the bullshit, it's also important we say enough to the places in us where we're giving our power away to that, by feeding that, knowing that it is important that we learn how to take care of ourselves and protect ourselves in a way that we couldn't when we were younger, when we had these initial traumas of the wounds of separation. And so we do that from a mature place that doesn't cause more trauma and more illusory separation and more tension, but that is in service to a deeper descending and a deeper unveiling of the ego and of the parts that might seem active or arrogant or aggressive or prideful, which are really just innocent cries for help and support. And we learn to give ourselves the healthy boundaries so we don't need to get to that place. And also know that there is a sacredness to rage, and this is part of the boundary. There is a sacredness to the warrior archetype, and there's a sacredness to power and to rage. When it is used to unshackle oneself from the boundaries between your own power and your own freedom and the world, and to free the victim, and to dismantle and to meet the force of the world, the force of the concrete, with the right power to break through that, and that can express itself very sacredly. But if we are projecting and leaking all that energy and power outside, without then coming inside and having that boundary with ourselves to go deeper into the feeling and into the grieving, into the boundaries within us, where our power is still externalized outside, then we are perpetuating the illusion of separation, which we want to learn to meet and to descend into. So may we all be balanced in our boundaries, in our receptivity, in our fluidity. May we know what is good for us. May we learn, may we have grace and forgiveness and innocence and curiosity along the process of feeling into what is good for us, what works and what doesn't, and have unconditional forgiveness and compassion and mercy for trial and error and experimentation, knowing it's all part of the lesson and the plan and the integration of knowing, of learning, and of defining where we are, and we have grace and a fluid dance between boundaries and no boundaries, and continue to soften our defenses, and also have increased discernment of where to put our energy without guilt or shame, taking back the right to be responsible for ourselves and to love ourselves and to parent ourselves on behalf of our parents and all those who couldn't do that for themselves, even if the world doesn't understand why we're taking space from it, even if our partners don't understand why we need space and they're making it about them. It is about them. It's about the healing of them that they're not able to do happening through us for ourselves, and us being that permission and that example and that energetic embodiment and possibility for the world, which is within us. So, good fucking job. I'm gonna put a boundary right here and turn off the video. In a minute. And then we be flexible and remain open and authentic and true to ourselves, and learn to take it slower. Like, I was kind of rushing in this video because I'm excited and I'm not used to it and I'm not fully comfortable being embodied, but this energy is coming through, and I'm glad I got it through in a way that's not longer than it had to be, even though it probably could have been shorter if I was more dropped in. Anyway, all that to say, may we all grant ourselves the grace to see everything that life is making out of resonance as an opportunity to soften into, or to discern into where we want to put our energy in new ways, in a way that is not unnecessarily violent or causing more rifts, but that is fully celebrating the unity and the realization of that which we've always been.